all due respect, I really appreciate that you went first, because you do have a sense of the history of some of the movement around cycling in Toronto, and your remarks reflected that. So my entry into cycling in Toronto is quite new. I've been at the City of Toronto for 2 years in 2 weeks. The first year and a half or so as the manager of the Cycling Infrastructure and Programs Unit. For those of you who have been engaged in the issue of cycling in the past, that role was played by Daniel Egan. For the last 6 months, and I'm not sure at which point that will end, I've actually been the Director of Transportation Infrastructure Management, which is one of the, and cycling infrastructure is one of the units under which that I'm responsible for. And it's been an interesting process to be both here at the city for the last 2 years and in this role in the last 6 months, because I think what you'll hear from my remarks is that from the history that Albert described to today, things have very much changed about cycling in Toronto. So it's great to be here at an event like this. Why should I care? Why should I care? Why are these issues so controversial? What's driving the discussion on cycling issues in the City of Toronto today, and where are we at and where are we going? I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so I'm going to keep my remarks pretty brief, because I think many of you will have heard what I have to say. When we work as civil servants, you sort of have a line about what you've been working on, and you work through the process, and so some of what I'll say won't be very, very different. But I think what's interesting about an event like this, Why Should I Care, is that we can have a conversation, and I think that's what most of the event is structured around.
Hold the mic closer.
Oh, sorry. A little bit closer to Albert.
Okay.
Albert and I are close, so I'll just get a bit closer. Albert came into my office about maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I started and said, "We'd really like to see a pilot project on Bloor Street." I really think that it would work if we had it from about St. George, maybe Avenue, and you got it to Shaw. That would make a lot of sense. And what would that look like? What could I do? And what could the advocacy and organizing committee community do around that issue to help you as staff get there? And so it was really great to see Albert come in and to present that as an argument with some colleagues, because it structured a lot of the last 2 years for me, and it's been a very rewarding time for those of us who've been involved in cycling issues in the City of Toronto, because a lot has been done. A lot has been done, and a lot is still yet to do, but the council has made the discussions around council, while they've still been loud and long, they've been much less controversial when it comes down to the actual vote on these issues. So if we look back at the last 2 years, particularly the last year, and I'll speak to the time that I've really been involved. I can certainly in the questions refer back to time before I've been involved based on what my staff have told me, but I'll speak from my own experience right now. We've had some major significant events. We had the approval of the Bloor pilot and then the subsequent installation, one of the fastest installations of bike lanes that we've seen in Toronto between approval and installation. And on the most controversial strip of Bloor, because not only has the conversation about Bloor Street bike lanes been going on for 40 years, as Albert has described to me, but it also is the most narrow section of Bloor Street that we've put this pilot in. And part of the rationale for that was about the limits in terms of what it does for the network in terms of connecting to St. George and to Shaw, but also because it has a parallel route on Harbour. So it really, the fact that there's such a demand on Bloor Street in this section, even with a parallel route, it has something to prove here. And the results of this evaluation are going to be quite significant as we go forward, and I'll talk to a little bit more as to why. But the fact that it's the most narrow also means it's the most constrained. And so as staff who are looking at the transportation network impacts and how you design a facility in the most narrow section of Bloor Street, this will teach us a lot as to what we can do on other sections of Bloor and other corridors that are similar to Bloor, like Danforth. So that's one piece. But I'll get back to sort of what I wanted to structure my remarks at, is that, so as I said with the approval of the Bloor bike lanes, the conversation in the media was quite controversial. The conversation on the council floor was quite controversial. But it was actually an overwhelming vote of support when it came down to it. The mayor was on side, and councillors on left and right of the spectrum were on side. A lot of questions about what we were going to evaluate through the pilot and what that measure of success would be, but there was a great deal of support because the time for considering these things has come. We are thinking about cycling as a mode of transportation in this city in a more serious way than we ever have before. And the other vote that's been most significant in the last few months has been the vote to approve the 10-year cycling network plan, which we've had in the past, a bike plan from 2001, which was very much a very strategic document. It looked at putting bike lanes across the city. It was right after amalgamation, where there was sort of an equality of bike lanes across the city considered, about at the same kilometer grid. And so it came from a time when we wanted to treat the entire city the same. This plan was a little bit different because we had a lot more analysis into the feasibility of bike lanes. We did a lot more geospatial analysis in terms of transportation network planning and understanding the way that the potential for demand could be in different parts of the city based on density of jobs and employment and residents and existing and future, that kind of thing. But it also is tied to our capital program. And so it meant that in the capital budget that Council approves in the next month or so, there are huge dollars for cycling infrastructure tied to this plan. It was a plan that we had previously approximately $8 million a year for cycling infrastructure in the City of Toronto. We now, according to this plan, have $16 million a year. What kind of program in a city that has clear budget constraints, as we've been talking about? You've heard John Tory Peter Wallace talk about the iceberg, the city managers talk about the iceberg of capital investment backlog. We've doubled the cycling infrastructure budget. There aren't any other budgets within the city that are doubling. So that's a significant thing. So we need to recognize the moment that we're in terms of transportation and cycling planning, and it's really exciting. And it has to do with the fact that as a city, we're coming to terms with the fact that we are densifying and that cycling is a mode share that can move people in a very space-efficient way. It's good for our health because we have public health crises in terms of the level of activity, both in children, but as adults as well. In terms of our environmental challenges, in terms of addressing congestion. So all of these things the city is taking very seriously, and you can tell that based on these votes that have come forward. Our staff right now, our challenge is structured in a few ways. One is that the demands on us to deliver on this money is huge. There are staff positions within the transportation services division assigned to deliver these dollars, but we obviously have to be quite conservative in putting new staff in the budget because there's concerns about any new staff person that comes in. So our desire to deliver on these, our mandate to deliver on these projects is going to be very focused, and it's going to show a test of these projects. The other piece is the evaluation, because overall transportation projects are being evaluated in a more thorough way. And I'll say overall, but it does seem to be focused more on projects like cycling projects. People have asked the question, well, what kind of evaluation is going into decisions about, say, the gardener? But there are trade-offs in retrofitting infrastructure on our roads. Like, we are talking about trade-offs of taking away parking spaces and taking away lanes. And when we have a mayor particularly concerned with congestion, we need to demonstrate that this project is going to be successful. And so that's why there's such a robust evaluation program in place for the Bloor bike lane. So it's not just about how many cyclists. We're also evaluating the travel time. We're also evaluating the where the vehicles and cyclists are going. We're comparing it to different corridors, both on Harvard and DuPont. And we're also looking at safety improvements and demonstrating the fact that this project has impacts and benefits, and what are those. So reporting back to council in the fall on that. So that's going to be quite an interesting time in the fall when we report back on Bloor. So I've spoken about the cycling network plan and our delivery mandate. And what was astounding is that the amount of investment that came from the City Council when we got the approval to double the budget was quite a windfall. But then shortly thereafter, the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund from the federal government delivered even more. So we have $83 million over the next 2 years to deliver on some major trails projects in particular. Things like the extension of the Western Rail Path southerly into the core, the East On Trail, which is a major gap in our trail system, which people use for both commuting and recreation. And other things like design work to be able to make us in the right position to be able to deliver on the Eglinton Connects cycle tracks, which will be a significant cycle track across the center of the city. So things like that, we have even federal government support, which means that in order to actually assess projects like a cycling project as something that should be funded by a public transit infrastructure fund, means that the representatives that you have in your federal government are also supportive of cycling and what that means for city building. So that's a really exciting thing as well. The huge conversation right now about road safety, so I'm glad that Albert spoke about road safety. The city is maybe not moving fast enough, according to what some people think, or perhaps not in comparison to other cities, but Toronto is actually a very safe city in terms of traffic when you compare it to other major when you compare us to, you can hear me? When you compare us to other major cities in North America, and we have adopted a Vision Zero plan, and so rolling out that plan is going to be a very important focus for the next few years, and that has started in the 2017 budget as well. I've talked about the public expectations in terms of evaluation, but I think we also have to recognize the public expectations in terms of consultation are huge. There's a concern that cycling projects have impacts, and people who live in neighborhoods or have businesses fronting streets that are going to have cycle facilities are concerned about what that impact can be. And so working with communities, both in terms of advocates and community representatives from residents associations and business improvement areas, is a really critical part of delivering cycling projects, because we want to get people on side and convey what the benefits and impacts could be in a realistic way. And so that takes a lot of time. When I mentioned those budget numbers earlier, when you look at other transportation infrastructure work, they're usually much more costly in terms of the actual amount of money that it costs to put cycling facilities in. But the cost for cycling facilities is often in terms of the staff time and the public time to engage on these issues and come to a consensus, or at least come to an agreement with an understanding about what the impacts and benefits would be along that particular corridor. So it takes a lot of moving along, because change is hard for people. And so our team has engineers that actually do the work to design the facilities, but also planners that help work with communities to move us along. Demand for cycling is huge in this city. It's palpable that I have colleagues who come from other cities in North America to visit, and we chat about what they perceive as cycling in Toronto, and they're astounded at how many people bike where there's no facilities at all. People in cities like Portland will say, if you build it, they will come. And in Toronto, if you build it, the people who are there will be safer, right? And so that's the challenge that we're working with here. But we also want to expand into other areas of the city. And so the Cycling Network Plan is about not only the funding that I've discussed, but it's also about expanding network outside of the core, and it's about improving the quality of the facilities. So there's a threefold mandate, and our team is working heavily on that. Connect, grow, and renew. And so I've spoken about that at other events. I won't get into that a bit more unless you have questions about it. I wanted to mention the bike parking strategy, which is also a key part of it, especially when we're on a street like Bloor or just up from it, and it's very hard to find bike parking along many parts of the city. And we have a strategy in the network plan included $1 million a year over the next 10 years to invest in bike parking. Some of that is for bike stations at transit, because we want to see more multimodal trips happen. We see a demand for that, particularly outside of the core, where people want to be able to connect their trip, not take a long bus to get to rapid transit and then take rapid transit to get where they want to go. But also expanding our bike post and ring program and multi-bike racks across the city. So that's part of our plan as well. Let's just check if there was anything I missed as I'm rambling along for you. The strategy of pilots, I wanted to just touch on briefly as well. I know people get frustrated with the notion of pilots because haven't cycling projects been sort of proven either in Toronto or in other cities before? But I think what they do is they provide us an opportunity to be iterative about the way that we work a project. We can improve it over time, and it provides us an opportunity right now to show the success of those projects and show the impact of those projects as evidence for the next one. And so I think we should take those opportunities for pilots as they come, because they are more easily to get approved. If we had said, full stop, we want to put in bike lanes on Bloor Street in 2016, would council have given us a 36-3 vote? No, right? But the notion of a pilot is something that the mayor got behind and that councilors got behind generally. So we will continue to use pilots as a strategy for the next little while, particularly because they give us the opportunity to change things as we go and tweak them to improve them as we go forward. I think I'll leave it at that and look forward to your questions. Thank you.